"You're violating Section 8B of the neighborhood facade standards," the woman barked, clipboard pressed against her floral blouse like a shield. Daniel glanced up from his crouch beside the garden bed. "It's a wind chime, Deborah, not a meth lab." Her lips pursed. "It reflects light at odd angles. That constitutes a reflective nuisance. I'll be submitting a notice." Daniel dusted off his knees, walked over to the porch post, and flicked the brass chime gently. It rang once, pure and soft. "You know what else reflects light?" he said, calm but sharp. "The server that still runs half the motion sensors in this neighborhood, including yours." She blinked. "I wrote the firmware. My name's Daniel Mercer. I'm a systems engineer, 39, and very recently the only living Mercer left. That house you see behind me? My dad built that with his own hands in 1994, brick by brick, the same calloused hands that fixed our roof in a storm and taught me to solder a circuit board when I was 9. So, no, I'm not going anywhere, especially not because of a wind chime. Where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments. If you've ever dealt with HOA hell, trust me, you're going to want to stick around for how this ends." Daniel arrived at Wisteria Pines with little more than a packed SUV, 2 sets of work boots, and a plastic tub of his father's belongings. The neighborhood hadn't changed much. Paved sidewalks, precision sprayed lawns, and a quiet so perfect it screamed at you. The gate buzzed open for him automatically. Mercer was still in the system. Of course he was. Eli Mercer was a founding resident and former board member, long before Miranda Goss took over. The house stood at the edge of a cul-de-sac, flanked by matching colonials. A few boards had warped on the porch. The paint on the shutters had faded 2 shades too light. But to Daniel, it looked like something holy. Inside, the air was thick with dust and silence. He opened the garage and saw the old workbench, untouched, a coffee mug still sitting under the pegboard like it was waiting for a hand to reach for it. His hand trembled as he touched it. "Miss you, old man." He walked out front and began pulling weeds by hand. It felt right, like penance and repair in one motion. The first letter arrived on day 3. Notice of violation. Your mailbox is painted hazelnut tan. Per Section 3A, all mailboxes must match regulation sand. Please repaint within 5 business days to avoid penalty. Daniel chuckled, then complied. Sand it was. On day 6, a second envelope. Lawn height 3.5 inches. Regulation was 2.3. He mowed. On day 9, wind chimes were reflective nuisances. Remove immediately. He removed them too, grumbling but compliant. For now. But as he walked each morning, he noticed things. Miranda Goss, HOA president since 2017, walked past his house twice a day, always pausing to check something. Tyler Randall, Miranda's little pit bull with a clipboard, started greeting him with smug questions. "Still fixing that place up, Dan?" At the end of his driveway stood the flagpole his father installed. Beneath it, a small bronze plaque etched with Sergeant Eli Mercer, "Home is worth defending." Daniel thought about how his dad fought in 2 wars, came back to build a family, and died quietly in that house surrounded by everything he loved. And now he couldn't even hang a wind chime without permission. One afternoon, Daniel opened the old fuse panel in the garage, checking circuits, and paused. There, scratched faintly in the metal, was his father's handwriting. "You don't fight everything, just the fights that matter." Daniel stared at it for a long time. The notice letters were piling on the kitchen counter. He folded his arms. "Okay," he whispered, "let's find out which kind this is." "You don't fight everything, just the fights that matter." My dad had carved those words into the metal of the fuse box with the same pocket knife he used to clean fish on Sundays. I stared at them a long time, longer than I probably should have. By morning, the 4th HOA notice had arrived. This one was about the driveway. Hairline cracking detected. Suggested repair deadline, 10 days. I ran my fingers across the concrete, barely visible. If you squinted, in the wrong light. After a stroke. I tossed the envelope on top of the growing pile on the kitchen counter. Wind chimes, lawn height, mailbox color, house numbers, now concrete. I hadn't even unpacked half my boxes, and already I was apparently running a crime scene. The neighborhood didn't feel like a place you lived in. It felt like something you signed up to survive. That afternoon, I got my first missing package. Small box, electronics, nothing flashy, just a secondhand USB power station I needed for the garage cameras. I checked the delivery notification, dropped at 9:16 a.m., porch cam footage, nothing. Just blank space where the video should have been. Figured it might be a tech glitch, but I didn't like how it lined up with Miranda's daily walk schedule. I'd seen her the same morning, strolling past like she always did, latte in one hand, clipboard in the other, pausing a little longer than usual at the corner of my hedges. Around 6 p.m., I stepped out front and caught a delivery driver pulling up in a rusted-out van. Local guy, Corey something. I waved him down. "You drop off a box here earlier?" I asked. Corey scratched at his temple. "This morning? Yeah, brown one, about yay big." He gestured with both hands, then pointed toward my porch. "Set it by the post where the shade hits." "It's not there." "Looked pretty normal. No dogs, no people. Just you and the squirrels." I nodded. "Thanks." The way he said it, "just you and the squirrels," made me realize how alone this place really was. Wide lawns, empty porches, cameras in every corner, and no one actually watching out for anyone else. Wisteria Pines didn't have neighbors. It had audience members. At dinner, I logged into the Wisteria Watch Facebook group again. Mostly recipe swaps, fence complaints, someone reporting that a kid's bike was left in the cul-de-sac overnight. But there was a pinned thread: compliance concerns and friendly reminders. I scrolled. Tyler Randall had commented on at least half the posts. I clicked on one of his replies. He was reminding someone not to park too close to hydrants. The hydrant in question was decorative, not even connected to a line, just noise, constant noise. Around 8:30, I went out to water the lawn. Miranda appeared again, like she'd been waiting. Same hat, same latte, same clipboard. "Evening, Daniel," she chirped. "Hope you got our little note about the driveway. We just want to make sure everyone keeps up appearances. Resale values depend on consistency." I nodded, turned the hose off. "Appreciate the concern." Her eyes flicked to my porch. "No packages tonight?" I froze. She smiled. "It's just that I saw a box earlier. Thought maybe you got something special." I didn't answer. Didn't blink. Just watched her walk off like she hadn't just tipped her hand. The next morning, I reconfigured the porch cam, added a local SD backup in case the cloud connection failed again. I put another cam in the upstairs window to catch the easement behind the hedges. If Miranda was cutting through the backside on her walk, I'd see it. Mrs. Florin caught me with the ladder. "You watching raccoons?" she asked, eyes squinting behind thick bifocals. I smiled, just making sure no one steps where they shouldn't. She looked toward Miranda's house across the street and whispered, "Your father didn't like her either, said she smiled too wide." "Yeah," I said, clicking the final camera into place. "I've started noticing." That night, I checked the footage from the previous day. There she was, 5:47 a.m., Miranda on her walk. She paused just behind my fence line, right where the porch cam glitched. She bent down for a moment, out of view, and then kept moving. So, it wasn't just notices. She knew what was coming to my house before I did. And maybe, just maybe, she was making sure it never got there. The next package disappeared 3 days later. This one mattered more than the others, a signed first edition of Endurance, my dad's favorite book. I found the delivery slip half tucked under the doormat, but the porch, empty. No footage, no knock. Just a familiar emptiness. By then, I'd stopped getting angry. I was shifting gears. The HOA board meeting was held that Thursday in the Wisteria Pines clubhouse, a place that tried hard to smell like fresh linen, but mostly reeked of entitlement and artificial lemon. A semicircle of plastic chairs faced the head table, where Miranda sat like a monarch behind her floral agenda folder. Her silver necklace gleamed beneath the fluorescence, catching every eye in the room except mine. I scanned the board. Most of them wore practice smiles, the kind you rehearse in a mirror until you forget what real expression feels like. All except one. Lena Hartman sat third from the left. Dark blazer, soft posture, hands trembling just enough to notice. She looked like she didn't want to be there. Or maybe like she'd been there too long and was only now realizing it. Miranda tapped the gavel lightly, more performative than necessary. "Let's begin." She launched into updates, painting standards, seasonal decor restrictions, some nonsense about QR codes for resident compliance forms. I listened barely. What caught my attention wasn't what was said, but the silence in between. The way Lena wouldn't meet my eyes, how she blinked twice when Miranda said, "Enforcement consistency." Her pen didn't move once the whole meeting. "New business?" Miranda asked, like it was a formality. I raised my hand. "I'd like to report multiple incidents of missing deliveries, possibly stolen, consistently disappearing from my porch." Miranda didn't miss a beat. "Packages are the responsibility of the homeowner, Mr. Mercer. We advise installing visible security cameras to deter theft." Her smile stretched wider. "You know, like the guidelines suggest." "They are visible," I replied. "And they show someone walking a dog past my hedges 5 mornings a week. Same person, same time, same route." Murmurs buzzed around the room like startled bees. Miranda's smile didn't flicker. "Are you making an accusation?" "I'm making an observation. You might call it data." She folded her hands like a priest at a funeral. "The board cannot entertain slander, Daniel. If you're not comfortable here, there are always other neighborhoods with looser expectations." My blood didn't boil. It cooled, got precise. I looked over at Lena. Her eyes dropped to her lap, one hand balled into a fist. Outside, the sun was setting behind the clubhouse windows. Light filtered through in stripes across the wall, making the whole room feel like a cage. After the meeting, I lingered near the bulletin board, pretending to study a flyer about HOA approved mailboxes. Miranda was chatting with Tyler, both of them laughing too loudly, too easily. Lena stepped past them, walking briskly. I moved to intercept. "Ms. Hartman," she stopped, barely. "Mr. Mercer, you looked uncomfortable in there." Her mouth twitched. "I don't like conflict." "Neither do I said, "but it keeps finding me." Her fingers clutched the strap of her bag. "If you're looking for justice in this place, you won't find it in the minutes." She didn't wait for a response, just walked out into the twilight, heels echoing across the tiles. On my way home, I stopped at the curb and looked at the flagpole. The plaque beneath it was still, there, untouched, but it felt like the next target. Back inside, I started scanning through the HOA's bylaws again. I'd bookmarked them on my laptop during the meeting, just in case. There were loopholes, exceptions, areas of individual discretion, Miranda's favorite phrase. I clicked over to the folder labeled Incidents, Footage, Screenshots, Camera Logs. I started renaming the files, adding dates, creating structure. My dad used to say, "If it's worth remembering, it's worth organizing." He also used to say that some people only understand consequence when it stings. Back in the clubhouse, Miranda had told me to leave if I didn't like it here. But she had no idea. I wasn't planning on leaving. I was just getting started. By morning, I had every file renamed, time-stamped, and backed up in 3 different locations. I wasn't just keeping a record anymore. I was building a case. And the funny thing? It didn't even feel like revenge. It felt like maintenance, like tightening bolts on something that was rattling apart. But all that calm cracked the moment I walked out to the lawn. The plaque was gone. The one under the flagpole, my father's name, his rank, the years he gave to this country and this house. The grass where it sat was disturbed. No note, no warning, just stripped away like it didn't matter. I stood there longer than I probably should have, waiting for it to be a misunderstanding. For someone to come walking up and say, "Oh, that was a mistake." But no one came. And deep down, I knew who did it. Trash day in Wisteria. Pines happens like clockwork. Bin lids are lined up like soldiers. I checked every one on the curb. Nothing. The last stop was the community dumpster behind the clubhouse, next to the maintenance shed. I should have worn gloves. The plaque was wedged between an old wreath and a bundle of shredded mailers, scratched, bent at the corner. I pulled it out with both hands, the metal cold and greasy. I could still see the engraving. Sergeant Eli Mercer, home is worth defending. And that's when something cracked in me. Not a loud shatter, but the quiet kind. The kind that leaks slowly, quietly poisoning everything you thought was stable. You ever been pushed too far over something that, to other people, looks small? A lawn ornament, a metal plate, a chime. But for you, it's the last line. The thing that says, "This is mine." Drop a comment if you know that feeling, where it wasn't just about the object. It was what it stood for. Miranda didn't just toss a plaque. She tossed a life, a name, a father. I set the plaque down in the garage and scrubbed my hands with orange degreaser. Couldn't get the smell of rot out of my nose. That sour chemical dumpster stench, sharp and wrong. Inside, I opened every folder, every drive, printed every violation notice, labeled screenshots from my porch cams. There were patterns, time of day, targeted items, her walks, even Tyler's. Appearances with that stupid clipboard matched up with the most aggressive notices. But it wasn't enough to know it. I had to build it. Lay it out like code, modular, readable, undeniable. I pulled out a whiteboard from the garage, flipped it over to the clean side, and started mapping. One column for violations, one for disappearances, one for surveillance timestamps. It was all connected. This wasn't enforcement, it was erosion. Quiet, sanctioned erosion of property, peace, dignity. I thought of my dad fixing the fence after the 2010 flood, his hands bleeding from the barbed wire. He never asked for help. He never complained. But when the old HOA tried to fine him for replacing the wood without pre-approval, he didn't just pay it, he ran for the board. And now, his name in a garbage bin. I opened a new Google sheet and titled it Line in the Sand. Page 1, Timeline of Incidents. Page 2, Miranda's Known Appearances. Page 3, Rules Violated by HOA, not residents. This wasn't just defense anymore. I was prepping for something larger. The front door rang. I opened it slowly, ready for more plastic smiles. Mrs. Florence stood there holding a small cardboard box. Her hands shook slightly, but her voice was solid. "This was on my porch. Addressed to you." I took it, already guessing what I'd find. Torn packaging, opened seal. Inside, a broken model airplane kit. The kind my dad and I used to build when I was 10. She looked up at me, eyes rimmed with red. "They didn't even try to hide it," I nodded. "I'm done playing polite." Something changed after that. Not rage, not even revenge. Just a switch flipping. Passive mode off. Active mode engaged. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to threaten. I was going to document, trace, cross-reference, build pressure the way she built fines. Quiet, constant, and relentless. Because Miranda liked rules, I was about to make her choke on them. After I set the plaque back in place beneath the flagpole, dented corner and all, I couldn't go back inside right away. I stood there with a wrench in one hand and dirt on my jeans, staring at that strip of lawn like it could tell me what to do next. The sun had dropped behind the trees. Crickets had started up. Wisteria. Pines sounded peaceful again. But the kind of peace you get just before something breaks. Inside, I opened the garage and turned on the overhead light. One of the fluorescent tubes flickered, humming like it had a secret. I looked up toward the attic crawl space over the rafters. I hadn't touched it since I moved in. My dad was meticulous. The man labeled his coffee can Screws. If he kept notes about the HOA, and I was starting to believe he did, they'd be somewhere up there, out of reach, out of sight. I pulled over the old stepladder, tested the legs for wobble, and climbed up slow. The panel door groaned like it was resisting me. I popped it open, climbed through. It hit me right away. Dust so thick it felt alive, air stale like it had been holding its breath for years. I waved a hand and crawled forward, knees pressing into plywood. The attic was low and narrow, with only one bare bulb hanging by a cord, swinging ever so slightly like someone had just left. I grabbed it to still it, pulled the chain. The light snapped on and off and back on again with a final buzz. There were boxes, old ones, some marked X-Mass, others with faded masking tape scrawled in my dad's block letters. Tools, car parts, storage, keep. I scanned them one by one, heart rate ticking faster. A spider crawled over the back of my hand. I didn't flinch. Halfway down the row, tucked behind a rusted metal filing cabinet, I saw it. A red banker's box. Lid bowed from moisture. Label, HOA, complaints and notes. I pulled it toward me, hard in my throat. The top came off with a whisper of cardboard tearing. Inside, folders, receipts, stapled letters with angry red ink. Notes scribbled in the margins, my dad's handwriting. Retaliation? Circled. One folder was labeled GOSSM. Another said, meeting minutes, altered. Another one had a sticky note that read, She changed the vote tally. No way we lost. I flipped through them in a fog. There were notes going back over a decade, formal violations that had never been shared with the community, complaints submitted and then ignored. My dad had been tracking all of it, quietly, methodically. She'd been doing this longer than I realized, and not just to me. There were names I didn't recognize, residents who moved, sold, or vanished. A few had scribbled annotations like, left after garage incident or fined into foreclosure. He'd even tried filing a public records request, denied. And then a single envelope, separate from the rest, sealed. My name on the front, Daniel. If you're reading this, you've already figured it out. She's worse than you think. Get smart, stay quiet, document everything, finish it. No signature, just that old black ink he used for everything official. I sat back on my heels, the weight of that sentence pushing on my chest. Finish it? My throat was dry. I crawled back down, red box under my arm, flicked off the light. The bulb buzzed twice, then died. Good timing. Back in the kitchen, I spread the papers out like puzzle pieces. This wasn't a revenge story anymore. This was a handoff, a legacy I hadn't asked for, but one I couldn't ignore now. You ever find something your parents left behind and realize they trusted you to carry more than just their stuff? Let me know in the comments. What did you inherit that changed how you saw everything? Because I just inherited a war, and I wasn't about to lose it. I kept the red box sealed and stashed it in the back of the garage, inside a gutted shop vase. No one but me would think to open. My dad taught me early, trust is earned, but suspicion, that's instinct. And right now, I had more instinct than options. That night, I went for a walk. Not to cool off, not for exercise. I just needed to move without thinking. Wisteria Pines was too clean, too staged. Every yard like a showroom, every porch like a photo op. There was no room for grief in this place, no space for the truth. The sidewalk felt extra quiet, not silent, but hushed, like the neighborhood itself was waiting. At the corner near the retention pond, under the flickering streetlight where the HOA-approved azaleas never quite bloomed right, I saw her, Lena. She walked fast, head down, clutching her bag like it might bite her. When she noticed me, she slowed, not startled. More like she'd expected me. We passed without words. As she brushed by, something hit my arm. Software. Quick, like a gust. I looked down. A manila envelope, folded twice, edge frayed, no name, no writing, just wait. I didn't stop walking, neither did she. Her heels clicked down the sidewalk until they disappeared into the curve of the cul-de-sac. I waited until I was back home to open it. Inside, a USB drive, silver and unmarked. 2 printed pages, black and white email screenshots. The subject line on the first one read, Mercer. Again, Miranda's email signature stared up at me like a stain. Maybe if we delay a few more deliveries, he'll get the message. Bad dogs need training. No one copied, no formality, just casual cruelty, typed like grocery notes. The timestamp, 4 days before the model plane kit went missing. The second email was shorter, Miranda to Tyler. You keep eyes on the cameras, I'll keep eyes on the porch. He's too comfortable. I didn't know what burned more, the words themselves or how normal they sounded coming from her. If you've ever had proof land in your lap that you knew was real long before anyone believed you, drop it in the comments. What was it? A text? A voicemail? A slip of paper? This was mine. I didn't sleep. Couldn't. My brain kept cycling. How Lena got that. Why she gave it to me now. What risk she'd just taken. That woman was nervous before, sure. But this? This was the first move she made that couldn't be taken back. There were no fingerprints on the envelope. I checked. No note, no instructions, just the handoff. And maybe that was the point. No witness, no trail, no denial. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't a cry for help. It was ammo. I spent the next hour duplicating the USB. Once to a drive I kept in my toolbox. Once to my encrypted cloud. Once to a backup drive labeled Q1 Taxes 2022. The kind of file nobody opens unless the IRS asks them to. As I worked, I kept glancing at the HOA newsletter pinned to the fridge. The headline from Miranda's president's desk read, "Respect starts with regulation." I pulled it down, ripped it in half, and dropped it in the trash. The game had changed, and someone on the inside had finally cracked. Not loudly, not dramatically, just enough to let in the air. And that's how it starts, right? A whisper, a look, an envelope. Because the truth doesn't always come through a courtroom. Sometimes it walks past you in the dark and leaves something in your hand. I didn't open the USB again that night. Didn't need to. The emails burned into memory after one read. Instead, I cleaned the kitchen like it was a crime scene. Slow, deliberate, focused. Needed my hands doing something while my brain worked in overdrive. The next morning, I called an old friend from Georgia Tech, Raymond Diaz. Civil law, homeowner rights. The kind of guy who'd written an entire paper on the misuse of covenant enforcement in private residential governance, which back in school sounded ridiculous. Now, it sounded like my Tuesday. Ray picked up on the second ring. Daniel Mercer. Man, I haven't heard your name since senior year and midnight pizza lawsuits. What's up? Ever get a call from someone who's real calm but real serious? There was a pause. You got something, don't you? I've got emails, surveillance, documented harassment, HOA overreach, maybe even mail interference. Another pause. Damn, where? Wisteria Pines? Ray let out a low whistle. That place still breathing? Barely. He walked me through the legal picture. Quiet title issues, small claims options, civil code violations, but made one thing crystal clear. The police weren't going to touch this unless there was violence or felony theft. And even with the packages, I'd need certified delivery proof, not just app screenshots. Best I'd get without lawyers? Maybe a court date 6 months from now. I thanked him, hung up. Sat on the porch with a cup of cold coffee and stared at the clubhouse down the street. The law would take time, but I was done waiting. You ever look at a system designed to keep you powerless and realize it's not broken? It's working exactly the way they want it to. If you've been there, say where you're watching from. This part's for the quiet ones who decide it's time to fight smart. I opened my laptop and typed one phrase into the search bar. How to obtain a live pest control license, Georgia. 10 minutes later, I was reading line by line through a state registry form. Turns out, hobbyist licenses for natural pest relocation weren't that hard to get. An online certification course, a $67 fee, proof of safety knowledge, one notarized affidavit, and you could legally obtain and handle specific non-aggressive species, including the kind I was looking for, wasps, not the kind that maim, just the kind that fly, look terrifying, and make anyone within 5 feet rethink their life choices. I wasn't planning revenge. I was planning clarity. I dug into online entomology forums, DIY containment builds, and safety specs for air-permeable transit boxes. Found a guy in South Carolina who specialized in breeding controlled wasp colonies for organic pest control. Shot him an email, alias account. Told him I had a beetle problem in my garden beds and wanted to test a non-lethal deterrent. He wrote back an hour later. Sure thing, I can overnight a starter pod, fully legal. You got your state cert? Processing now, I replied. That night, I worked in the garage, dug out my dad's tool set, built a box from cedar panels, lined it with mesh, added a dual vent system to keep airflow steady but escape-proof. Smelled like sawdust and memory. Every screw I drove in felt like reclaiming a square inch of space Miranda had tried to own. My house, my tools, my hands. I tested the box with a battery-powered fan. Silent hum, airflow clean, sealed tight. By the time the permit processed, digital and official, I already had 3 copies printed, laminated, and filed under Community Wellness Projects. Let them try to twist that. I wasn't shouting into a void anymore. I was shaping it. Because when someone builds a fence to box you in, sometimes you don't knock it down. You go over it, or under, or you mail something through it that buzzes just loud enough to wake the neighbors. The delivery came in a plain white box marked Fragile Live Biological Contents, left at the edge of the driveway by a teenager who didn't even knock, which, ironically, made him the safest person in Wisteria Pines that week. I brought it inside like it was made of glass. Inside was the pod. A mesh-sealed capsule about the size of a travel mug, contained, stable, quiet. The wasps were small, sleek, dark-bodied and humming, just enough to remind you they were alive. Legally harmless, biologically active, Miranda-proof. I placed the capsule on the workbench and exhaled. It was almost elegant. People think revenge is fire and screaming in public chaos. Sometimes it's a blueprint, a checklist, a vented cedar box custom-built to turn fear into theater without crossing a single line of law. I ran the final inspection like I was shipping tech to NASA. Filtered mesh vents, clear. Anchor brackets, tight. Lid seal, secured with non-toxic wax strip and 2 interior latches. Labeled in all caps, confidential HOA materials. Urgent internal delivery. I couldn't stop smiling. Back inside, I powered up my backup system. 3 cameras now. Porch, driveway, attic window. All motion triggered. All patched through to a secure drive and synced to a time-stamped cloud folder. I even routed a copy to a dummy email account, set to auto-forward if I didn't check in every 48 hours. Because if Miranda wanted surveillance wars, she was stepping into a battlefield with fiber optics. You ever feel that shift where fear turns into focus? Like your hands stop shaking because your brain finally says, "We're doing this? Tell me where you're watching from." I want to know if you've ever had to engineer justice for yourself. While the final setup ran diagnostics, I tested weight distribution on the box. Had to make sure the Wasps stayed upright during transfer. No jostling, no premature buzzing, no chance for this to cross into actual danger. The point wasn't to cause harm, the point was to cause spectacle. I'd spent a week getting the story straight in my head. The violation notices, the stolen packages, the USB from Lena, the plaque in the trash. Every event logged and cross-checked against Miranda's timeline. What I was about to do wasn't just retaliation, it was framing. This wasn't personal vengeance. This was Exhibit A. I loaded the pod into the box, sealed it with a wax ribbon, and added a tag with a forged internal reference number GOSS-HQ-A7. Looked boring, looked official. The only clue? A tiny smiley face in the corner, just like the ones on her violation letters. Miranda liked to weaponize symbols. I could too. Once everything was set, I tested the response time from the motion sensors. 6 seconds to trigger, 8 seconds to begin upload. Fast enough to catch her expression. Slow enough not to miss the drop. At dusk, I walked to the clubhouse with the box in hand. Wore my gym hoodie, head down, calm. A neighbor waved at me. I waved back. Nothing to see here. The staff mailbox sat right inside the side gate, tucked behind a wall of polished rose bushes. Cameras watched the entrance, probably Miranda's own system. I smiled at them and nodded like a man dropping off rent. I slid the box in, heard it thunk softly onto the bin's plastic floor, and walked away. No dramatics, no fireworks, just a sealed box in the belly of the beast, waiting for morning. By the time I was back inside, I'd already gotten the ping. Camera 2 had detected motion. Auto upload active, footage safe. The system was humming. My house was quiet. The wasps were waiting. The thing about a moment like that, when you set everything in motion and just wait, is it doesn't feel like you'd expect. There's no dramatic score, no sweat-beating tension. It feels quiet, too quiet, like holding your breath for a punch that might never land. But I knew Miranda. She checked that Dropbox every Friday morning, always early, always alone. Like a ritual she trusted no one else to perform. Friday, 6:12 a.m., my upstairs cam caught her. Wide brim hat, blazer with the HOA pin on the lapel. That smug little walk like the world existed just to bend politely in her direction. She unlocked the clubhouse gate with her lanyard, flipped through her keys, and opened the Dropbox. She hesitated. The box was there, pristine, waiting. She picked it up with one hand, flipped it around once, and looked annoyed it wasn't labeled properly. She pulled the seal. Click. The top cracked open. The moment the airflow hit the containment mesh, the wasps inside began to stir, rattling softly like popcorn just starting to pop. Cam 3, angled through the upper gym window, captured her face. Confusion, followed by realization, followed by pure, high-octane panic. She dropped the box with a sharp yelp, arms flailing. Her latte flew. The wasps, thoroughly agitated but harmless, buzzed out in every direction. One landed on her scarf, another near her temple. She spun screamed. Her clipboard hit the ground like a gunshot. Her pearl necklace snapped mid-spin, beads scattering like hail across the polished tile. Her glasses skidded across the floor, and her heels, impractical even on normal days, gave out entirely. She collapsed backward into the decorative ficus plant with a sound somewhere between a scream and a wet cough. Tyler Randall, bless him, burst in 2 minutes later, probably to check on the security system, found her cursing on the floor, surrounded by buzzing confusion and her own shattered pride. Cam 1 never blinked. The footage auto-uploaded, quiet, precise. I'd set it to ping a dormant folder on a private video host account I hadn't touched since undergrad. The link wasn't shared, at least not by me. Yet. By 10:17 a.m., the video was on the Wisteria Pines residents' Facebook group. By 10:32, it had been downloaded, cropped, captioned, and reposted to a subreddit called HO Hell. By noon, the version with slowed-down playback and dramatic violin music had 27,000 views and a comment section that read like a war memorial for pettiness. My personal favorite comment: "You can fine a man for his mailbox, but you can't out-administer God's insects." It was the first time in weeks my inbox wasn't flooded with warnings or notices, just quiet. Suspicious, glorious quiet. No HOA statement, no Miranda sighting. But you could feel it, that shift, like everyone was holding their breath to see what came next. If you've ever had to fight fire with intelligence, if you've ever turned someone's obsession with control into the very thing that unraveled them, drop a B in the comments. Let the swarm know you're here. Later that day, I got a knock at the door. Not Miranda, not Tyler. It was Mrs. Florin, standing with a folded lawn chair and a container of lemon bars. "You watching this storm, Daniel?" she asked with a smile that could slice granite. I poured her some iced tea and pulled up a second chair. We sat on the porch, facing the clubhouse. The flagpole waved quietly behind us. No words, just sun, birds, and the very distinct, satisfying sound of nothing, because chaos makes noise. But consequence? That tends to arrive in silence. By Monday morning, Wisteria Pines wasn't humming. It was buzzing. Not from wasps, but from whispers, inboxes, text threads, and that cursed Facebook group Miranda had once ruled like a digital throne. The video had been reposted by 3 local satire pages. Someone made a remix. Complete with trap beats and a GIF loop of Miranda flailing in slow motion as her pearls scattered like popcorn. And yet, through all of it, I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. Lena did. Around 9:13 a.m., I received a text from an unlisted number, just a Dropbox link. No. Caption. I opened it. A single folder labeled Wisteria. Internal inside. Every document Miranda had ever buried. Denied complaints. Board member email chains. Altered minutes. 3 separate PDF files marked Adjust Fines Template, Confidential. One file had a spreadsheet of residents cross-referenced by perceived compliance risk. A literal score system. I was ranked number 2, right under a woman who moved out 2 years ago after being fined weekly for her non-standard shrub pattern. And it got worse. Miranda had pushed false violations through without board votes. She used Tyler to verify yard infractions that were never photographed. There were notes about locking residents out of meetings by shifting times at the last minute, illegally. Even a flagged email from Miranda saying, "If we squeeze him a little more, Mercer will either crack or sell. Preferably both." That was enough. Lena didn't go public alone. Colonel Byron Tate stepped in by noon. Nobody ignored Byron, retired Army, 2 tours, the kind of man who saluted the flag every morning and meant it. The kind of man who still had his uniform dry cleaned every 6 months in case the country ever asked for him again. He walked up and down the street with a clipboard, not for fines, but for signatures. The petition read, "Motion to remove Miranda Goss from the Wisteria Pines Homeowners Association Board for abuse of authority, malfeasance, and conduct unbecoming of a community representative." Within the hour, I heard it. Not sirens, not yelling, just doors. One by one, they opened, neighbors stepping out with pens in hand, some quiet, some smiling, some teary-eyed. Mrs. Florin signed without a word, just patted my arm and muttered, "Eli would have liked this part." Even Corey Dawson, the delivery driver, came back with an affidavit. Heck, if I'm going to be on camera half the time, might as well make it count. People began forwarding emails, posting screenshots. Tyler disappeared from the group chat completely. Someone, wasn't me, submitted the documents to a local investigative reporter who'd once done a 6-part expose on a corrupt HOA 2 towns over. She posted about it on Twitter with a single line. Wisteria's about to get real interesting. By sunset, the clubhouse was locked. Miranda hadn't been seen since Friday, but her silence wasn't protection anymore. It was proof. You ever witness a community that's been holding its breath suddenly exhale all at once? Drop a pin if you've signed something that finally made your voice feel loud. I didn't do interviews, didn't post a victory speech. I wasn't the face of the fallout, but I was the crack in the dam. And now, the water was doing what it always does, finding its way in. The clubhouse had never been this full. They'd pushed the folding chairs to every wall, opened up the doors, and people still stood shoulder to shoulder. Even the coffee urn, normally untouched, was empty by the time I got there. Byron was already seated in the front, arms crossed. Lena stood off to the side, avoiding eye contact with the podium. Miranda sat in her usual seat at the head of the table, but there was no mistaking the shift in energy. The room didn't belong to her anymore, not after the Wasps, not after the footage, and certainly not after the documents. She tried to act like it did, straightened her blouse, cleared her throat like this was any other monthly meeting. "Let's bring this to order," she said. "There's been a flurry of misinformation over the weekend, some of it quite damaging and inaccurate. We'll begin by—" "Point of order," Colonel Byron's voice rang out, calm, unflinching. Miranda blinked. "Excuse me?" He stood slowly. "We're not starting this meeting until Mr. Mercer is heard." He looked back at me. "Go ahead, son." The room shifted, all eyes on me. I didn't rush. Walked up to the podium like I was stepping into my own front yard. Pulled a flash drive from my pocket and handed it to Lena. She didn't speak, just nodded and slid it into the port. A projector flickered on. Behind me, the screen lit up with a timeline. I kept my voice low, steady. "This is a record of the notices I received over the past 2 months, each one time-stamped, some for grass height, mailbox trim, decorative wind chimes." I clicked to the next slide. "Here's the footage from my porch cameras. Everyday packages went missing, same time, same blind spot." Another click. "Here's metadata from the files Lena shared." I didn't look back at her. Internal emails that show this wasn't an accident. This was deliberate. Click. The infamous message appeared on the screen. "Train him like a bad puppy." There was a long silence, then whispers. I turned from the podium, faced the room. I didn't come here to fight. I came here to grieve in peace. This house, my father's house, was the only thing left tying me to him. My voice caught for a second, and she made sure that peace was impossible. Miranda laughed once, dry. "Anyone can fabricate emails. This is clearly retaliation." Lena stood. "They're real." The room froze. She raised her voice finally. Every word, every timestamp, every fine she passed without a vote. I tried to speak up. She threatened me. Gasps, murmurs. Mrs. Florin, seated in the second row, called out, "You made Eli cry in his last year." Over hedges. Miranda slammed her hand on the table. "This is a witch hunt." "No," Byron said, standing again. "It's a reckoning." He turned to the room. "Raise your hand if you've been unfairly fined, if your voice was ignored, if you felt powerless in your own home." Hands rose, dozens, maybe more. Miranda tried to speak again, but Lena cut her off. "I move for immediate removal of Miranda Goss from the board." Seconded, voted, done. Miranda didn't. Storm out. She just stood there, frozen, mouth slightly open like she hadn't considered this moment could actually happen. But it had. I didn't smile, didn't gloat. I just walked back to my seat as the gavel came down. Meeting adjourned. And, just like that, Wisteria Pines exhaled. It took 3 weeks, a lot of coffee, and Lena running 2 full audits, but Wisteria Pines finally began to breathe again. Not perfectly, but quietly. For the first time in a long time, quiet wasn't a warning. It was peace. Miranda hadn't been seen since the vote. Rumor was she moved in with her sister in Savannah. Tyler was quieter now too, kept his head down, lawn stayed trim, and the group chat. Funny how fast it turned from HOA alerts to bake sale flyers. Byron stood on the corner last Saturday, passing out American flags for Memorial Day. Said Eli would have approved. He handed me one without a word, just nodded. The old violations board at the clubhouse? Gone. Replaced by a new corkboard with a handwritten sign in Lena's neat cursive, "Community suggestions welcome." She didn't do press, didn't ask for applause, just started pulling up rotten roots and letting people speak again. Sometimes I'd see her sitting on the clubhouse steps after work, just breathing. That was enough. My house still looked the same, on the outside, but I'd reseeded the lawn, painted the porch trim back to the exact beige Dad once chose. The one Miranda said clashed with the community palette. Didn't matter now, because the plaque was back. I set it into fresh soil beneath the flagpole, polished bronze, clean lettering. In memory of Eli Mercer, neighbor, father, builder of foundations. It wasn't just a marker, it was a message. We remember, we rebuild. This morning, a small box sat on my porch. No fanfare, no knocks. Just a clean delivery with a simple label and a barcode. Corey probably dropped it off during his early route. I opened the door slowly. It was still there. Not stolen, not inspected, just mine. I picked it up, light, unassuming, but it felt heavier than most. Not in weight, in meaning. Inside was a replacement book, The Old Man and the Sea. The same edition my dad used to read when I couldn't sleep, his voice low and steady beside me. No note, just the book. And just like that, it all clicked into place. The lawn, the plaque, the package, the silence. It wasn't about getting even, it was about getting right. Justice doesn't always roar, sometimes it buzzes. If you've ever had to fight a quiet battle to reclaim your peace, your home, your space, your story, drop a comment. Let me know where you're watching from, or share your own HOA horror story. You're not alone. And sometimes, the underdog wins.